The one next to it is more of a light painting with some serious themes to it. I just wanted to talk about guidance and symbolism of balance between us and nature, you know, by having these folks riding tandem bikes with some representatives of, you know, Mother Nature, our animal kingdom, brothers and sisters. And the deer woman in that one is a theme that I like to work with because for me it symbolizes empowerment of, you know, our women, our sisters, you know, which, you know, are sort of the backbone of our community. And in that painting on the right there, it's just sort of like this little girl is just sort of getting on the right path. And I went with a lot of light colors in that one because it gets exhausting. You know, I got a lot of stuff that I want to talk about that's really heavy and it weighs me down. You know, like sometimes at the end of a painting, I'm exhausted. You know, like spiritually and mentally, I'm exhausted. So every once in a while, I gotta make something, you know, a little more light, a little more uplifting, and keep the balance.
Yeah, so you have a deer woman in that picture, and if you wanted to briefly talk about the deer woman in your picture over there, these parallels are really interesting.
They are, actually, and I didn't really think much about it until I was here for the opening as well, and somebody said, oh, it's the deer woman. I'm like, well, yeah, she is the deer woman. So the one we're talking about right now is the third one on the right, where we have Ishbalonke, and she is shooting with her blowgun the false sun, who is the scarlet macaw. And so when I did paint this picture, I like to visually tell a lot of the stories that come from a book, a sacred book of the Quiche, which is one of my home groups, ancestral groups, called the Popolu, and it's the book of the people, and it tells the story of creation and how humans were created, and a lot of stories about two characters called, well, there are actually four of them, two groups of hero twins, two pairs of hero twins. So she is the daughter of one of the first pair of hero twins. So, yeah. I'm going to say something. Oh, the Popol Vuh is also, I don't know if anybody is familiar with that book. It is wonderful because when the Spanish made it to Guatemala and they grabbed some of the Maya scribes that already knew how to read and write, and then to teach them the Latin alphabet in order to translate the Bible into the various Maya languages that were there. A Quiche scribe actually took the Latin alphabet and he wrote down some of these stories that he wanted to tell and preserve for future generations. All of our books prior to this had been burned by the Spanish priests, so a lot of knowledge and history was burned when they came into Guatemala and Mexico. So what he did is he wrote down these stories in Latin script, and then he hid them in a church. And it wasn't until several hundred years later that this book was found. And now we have it, so we do have some of our stories still, and it is taught to some of the kids in Guatemala. So she's one of the hero twins, and the hero twins are normally spoken about and talked about as two brothers. But in my mind, that never really made sense, because there's always got to be a balance between the male and the female. Female must always be present. And so thinking about her name is Ishbalonke, and Ish is a signifier oftentimes for a female. So I just kept thinking this has to be a female, and then it wasn't until I was reading some children's stories that, I don't know if you are familiar with Rigoberta Menchú, who won the '92 Nobel Peace Prize for her work in Guatemala during the genocide. She calls her Ishbalonke, which is the jaguar deer woman. And so I thought, oh, perfect. I was thinking the right thing. So I decided to make a painting of her as a woman. And then somebody said, oh, it's deer woman. And I thought, well, yeah, Kech is deer. And I started doing just a little bit of research into some of the stories regarding deer woman up here. And I thought, gosh, it sounds a lot like, we have these stories about a character called La Siwanava. And La Siwanava is a woman who is out in the park late at night or out in the country, and she lures men to their deaths. And, you know, once they get like really close to her, like she turns her head and she has the face of a horse. And then she kills them and all of this. Anyway, but I thought, you know, it's interesting because although it's a horse, which is an animal that the Spanish brought, quej is the word for deer, but it's also the word for horse. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I'm thinking like La Siwanava might be similar to some of the stories of Deer Woman. Anyway, so yeah.